Victory. How you guys doing today?
Good
You guys doing well?
morning.
Happy Mother's Day. Ashlyn, I just wanted to welcome all of you out this morning and let you know that we're so thankful for you. We're particularly thankful for all the moms in the room. We got any moms in the house? Awesome. I want everybody to turn around, find a mom today, and tell her that she is amazing.
All right, I want to say a big shout out to all the moms of little kids. You all look amazing, even though your dresses are sticky from your kids' sticky hands. Yeah. So you all look lovely.
Who here's accessorizing with some snot on their shoulder today? Anybody? Anybody? Inappropriate? Okay, we're just really, really thankful for the moms. Titus, you got anything to say to the moms?
Hello.
Okay. Titus says Hugh. So we're really, really happy to have you guys with us today. We're really happy that you decided to bring your mama. Sometimes Mother's Day can be, if you're like me, Mother's Day can be a little bit stressful because you're trying to find the perfect gift for your mom. Anybody have that experience? Maybe you wait to the last second. Anybody? Just me? Just me? Okay, me and Derek, my brother, we always wait until the last second. And this year, Derek, oh, hey, buddy.
Sorry.
This year, Derek really, really procrastinated, and so we got a little video to show you about how stressful it can be. Because I want, mothers, we want you to know we appreciate you, but sometimes, we go through some anxiety for you guys on Mother's Day. So I want you to check this video out real quick. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey, what's up? What do you mean tomorrow's Mother's Day? They got a day? They have a whole day? It's tomorrow. Oh God, I don't have anything. It's 9 o'clock. I got to do something. What do you do for someone that had you in there for 9 months? I'll draw her a picture. I'll draw my mom a picture. I'll just draw her something of her favorite thing. Picture of me. Boom. Me. Easter saved. I don't have a frame. I can't just hand her this. I have to have a frame for it. I gotta make her a frame. Chopsticks. God, I can't. This tape's so strong. I'm all out of tape. God, my hair is stuck. I'm all out of tape. Glue stick. Glue sticks. That's not a glue stick. Yes. I can melt knife to the paper. Why doesn't it work? What kind of bootlegging company makes Strike a Fire? Oh God, that's hot. Light this up. Be heated and... No! Maybe I don't have a frame. I'll frame it. Reese's origami wrapping paper. Just wrap it up. Okay. I'll put it here. Boy, oh boy, the things we do for our mothers. Honestly, I'm just thrilled that I was able to figure out that gift, get it wrapped, tied in a bow for mom. Ladies and gentlemen, you are talking to number one son. Oh God, the gift! My gift.
We just really want you moms to know, we try, okay? We really, really, really try, okay? It's stressful, so if you guys got, a scented candle today, we didn't know what to do, okay? We just really didn't know what to do. So, but we do hope that you have a great Mother's Day. We want to let you know that we appreciate all the moms in the room. And after service, we actually have a photo booth that's set up for you guys to go and force your family to take a picture and make them smile, you know those awkward, smile? No? Anybody? Was that just my family photo experience? Okay. Everyone else is just naturally smiling. Okay. Well, we're excited, again, like I said, to have you here today, and we hope that you guys are able to stop by the photo booth after service and take some really awesome family pictures. But we're going to jump into the message today. And this is not a Mother's Day themed message like, we're in the middle of a sermon series called Gods and Kings. So it's not particularly about mothers, but I do think that there's some really good, maybe some lessons that we can pull from it for the parents in the room, particularly the moms, and maybe some relationship restoration that can come out of what I'm going to be talking about today. And so for those of you that were here last week I talked about who's your king. I talked about who's sitting on the throne in your life. We all serve something. We all worship something. Just a matter of what you worship. It's a matter of what you make king in your life, because at the end of the day, God is going to allow you to choose whatever king you want to serve. God's not going to force you to serve him. And that's what we looked at last week. And last week we looked at how the children of Israel wanted a king. They wanted to be just like everybody else. They wanted to be like the other nations and the people around them. They wanted to blend in. And so they went to the man of God. They went to the prophet Samuel, and they demanded that Samuel make them a king. And so that's what we looked at last week, is how they wanted to be like everyone else, and they wanted to have a king just like the nations around them. And the interesting thing that we saw last week, and we're going to be picking up right in the same chapter, in some of the same verses that we were in last week, in 1 Samuel chapter 8. The interesting thing that we saw is that when the children of Israel came to Samuel demanding a king, Samuel was really upset. He was really disappointed because the man of God understands that a king is so much more than what we make it out to be. A king is not just there to fight our battles. A king is not just there to make us look like everyone else. A king is so much more than that, or ought to be so much more than that. And so when the children of Israel were coming up and asking for an earthly king, the man of God became very disappointed. And we see in 1 Samuel chapter 8, starting in verse 6, it says this: "When Samuel heard their demand, 'Give us a king to rule us,' he was crushed." How awful. Samuel prayed to God. Now, Samuel had sons, and what was happening is the people were rejecting his sons coming in to lead them. The Bible tells us that the sons of Samuel weren't very good people. And the interesting thing for me is that Samuel doesn't really seem very upset that they are rejecting his family, that they also appear to be rejecting him as well. He seems more concerned that they're rejecting God. And I think the interesting thing for me, particularly as a pastor, is putting myself in this mindset. I was trying to think of how I wanted to talk about Samuel today. And I could talk about Samuel in a million different directions, but what really resonated to me and what really stood out to me about Samuel's story is this particular section of Scripture. Because I believe that the hardest thing about being a man or a woman of God is watching people choose the wrong king. I believe the hardest thing about being a man or a woman of God is watching people choose the wrong king. The Bible describes it as crushing. Is there anybody in here today, maybe you're a mother, maybe you're a father, whatever it might be, but you've watched somebody dear to you choose the wrong king? Anybody in this room? You've watched a family member, you've watched a spouse, you've watched maybe a parent of yours, or a cousin or an aunt, somebody, maybe even a dear friend, and you've watched them choose the wrong king. And what I mean by the wrong king is I mean the thing that you're going to allow to influence and control and lead your life. The thing that guides your thoughts, that guides your behaviors, that guides your decision making. Have you ever watched somebody choose the wrong king? Is there anybody in here you've ever been devastated because somebody you love made a decision to give their life over to the wrong thing? Anybody in this room, you've been crushed by it? You can identify with Samuel. And for me as a pastor, it just particularly resonates with me because I have so many people that I come into contact with, and there's so many people, like many of you, like you get into this, particularly for Mother's Day, there's many women in this room and you've got a child or 2 or 3, or maybe, you went a little crazy, you got 6 or 7, but like there's a limited amount of people that you are in that sort of a position with in your life where you're kind of like this paternal figure, where you're kind of over them. And for me, it's interesting because as a pastor, I really do become more or less a spiritual parent for a lot of people. And over the years of this church, I mean, right now we have well over 400 people that call Victory their home. But over the years, there have been hundreds that have come and gone. And I would dare to say thousands of people that have come and gone through this church. And it's very interesting to me because there's not very many people that have been here for a long time. There's very few people that have been here for more than 10 years. Very, very, very few people. And to my memory, outside of my family, I don't think that there's anybody that's been here since the very, very beginning anymore. So I've seen a lot of people come and go. And sometimes it's a good thing, right? Like we can all acknowledge that sometimes people leaving churches is good. And maybe God's calling them somewhere else, or maybe they're moving or whatever. But a lot of times, people leave, people fall away, and it's because they chose the wrong king. It's because they chose the wrong king, and that can be crushing. Me and Ashley, we were sitting down talking about this concept just the other night, and we were bringing up name after name after name. I mean, I remember there was a young girl that was raised in church, and then came to this church from a young age, and she was very close to Ashley and I, and she would spend a lot of time at our house. She would come over all the time. So she was one of those people that actually came over a little too much, you know? Like the kind of person where like you invite a certain group of people and then this person just shows up. It was like her parents knew that we were having people over and they would just drop her off. And she was always, always there. And I remember she was the sweetest, most innocent, most pure, most kind-hearted child that I could think of. And I was talking to Ashley about her, and she chose the wrong king in her life. And in her later teen years, she started falling away from God, and she started getting involved in drugs and getting involved with the wrong men, and she's been in and out of prison time and time again, and she's been homeless. She's wandered from home to home. She's driving on suspended licenses. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine. Every poor decision that you could think of, she's made. There's another young man that used to come to this church and was really, in a lot of ways, kind of like a son to Ashley and I. And he doesn't have as epic of a falling away story, but he came to this church for years and years and years, like probably close to a decade. And then at some point, not that long ago even, he made a decision to serve a different king. And he hasn't gone off and gotten involved in drugs. He hasn't gone to, that I know of, he hasn't, gone to prison or anything like that, but he's just simply serving the wrong king. And other people that look at him might look at him and think that maybe he has his life together. He's got a great job. He's not making a terrible shambles of his life, but he is simply serving the wrong king. And when I look at him, I remember the young man that looked me in the eye one day and said, I really feel like I want to be a pastor. And now he's completely away from God. And it's crushing. It's crushing. I've seen things over the years that will break your heart. And it's so devastating to be in a situation where you're with somebody that you care about and you want them to make the right decision. You watch them make a terrible one. I was thinking about this couple that I was counseling probably about a year or so ago. Actually, it might be 2 now. But I was sitting down counseling with them, and I remember that they were at this point where the husband was making some terrible, terrible decisions. And the wife in that counseling session looked at her husband and said, you have to make a decision right now. Do you choose me or this? Do you choose me or this? And he looked her in the eye and said, I choose that. And he chose the wrong king. He chose the wrong king. He had a wife and a child that loved him. He had a marriage. He had a family. He had a purpose. And he threw it all away because he chose the wrong thing. And I want to let you know, it's difficult to sit in those situations. Some of you parents, like as I'm talking, like maybe you're empathizing, maybe you know what, like your heart connects with what I'm saying because maybe you've been in that situation with a child. And you've been doing your best, and you've you've brought them up in the ways of God, and you've given them a biblical worldview, and you remember praying with them at bedtime at night. You remember Bible studies as a family, and now your child doesn't want to live for Jesus. It's devastating, isn't it? It's crushing. And it's interesting to me because if I look at the story of Samuel, when the people came to Samuel, they came to him with what they felt was a reasonable request. There was nothing about it that seemed preposterous. There was nothing about it that inherently seemed wrong or bad. They just came to Samuel and they wanted a king. And on the surface, that's a completely fine request, but the problem is that Samuel saw down the road where that decision would take them. And it wasn't so much the request in and of itself, it was the implications of that request and what that meant for them in the future. And sometimes, I need you to hear me, you guys, sometimes you're going to be tempted to make decisions that on the surface seem beneficial, but there are implications behind it that will reverberate through your life for years. And Samuel finds himself in this situation, and what was reasonable to the people was displeasing to the man of God. And I want to leave you with a thought this morning. Just because you have cheerleaders doesn't mean you're right. Just because you have cheerleaders doesn't mean you're right. Just because you can find people in your circle that will encourage you to do the thing that deep down you really want to do but know you ought not to do, doesn't mean that the decision is in your best interests. Are you with me this morning? It's insane how many terrible life-shattering choices I've seen advocated on social media. You ever see that? I was just on Facebook just the other night, and I saw this girl that she used to come to our youth group, used to come to our church. I've known her since she was probably 12 years old. And she's married, she has children, and she put up on social media, "Marriage is too difficult. I don't want to do it anymore." And you know what blew my mind is the comments underneath that. "Girl, you shouldn't have to. Girl, you don't need to fight for him. Make him fight for you. Oh, if it's hard, girl, you can run away. I left my man. It was the best decision I ever made." And all these people are jumping on and they're encouraging her to make a decision that doesn't just affect her, but affects her children for the rest of their lives. I want to let you know, the crowd has little reservation with encouraging you to flush your life away. The crowd has little reservation with encouraging you to flush your life away. Just because you go on Facebook and you talk about how you've been hurt or wronged doesn't mean the justification that you get from the feedback from people that comment is what you need in your life. Are you with me? And the problem is that what we're looking for is we're looking for what feels good, not what is good. We're looking for what feels good, not what is good. We're trying to find people that are going to tell us what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. We're trying to get people's sympathy instead of getting God's direction. And sometimes it's heartbreaking to watch. Because just like the children of Israel, we not only want to look like the world, but I want to let you know the world wants you to look like them as well. Are you hearing me this morning? The world wants you to look like them as well. You ever find somebody that's just trying to get you to make like terrible decisions? Anybody? You know what's funny? A lot of times I'm that person. I just went out to dinner with one of the brothers in church, and I'm like, we went up to Culver's, and I'm like pressuring him. I'm like, get an ice cream, get cheese curds, get all this stuff. He's like, no, I'm fine. I'm gonna have a water. I'm like, no, soda. Get a concrete mixer. Candy. And just pressuring him. And then like eventually he's like, hey, listen, I'm just trying to make better, like healthier eating decisions. And I realized, like, I just want him to eat some cheese curds so I don't feel fat. That's all I want right now. I just need him to conform, because if you're eating salad and I'm eating like a molten lava cake, like, I feel bad. And I'm not trying to feel bad right now. The cake is too delicious for me to feel bad. I need you to conform so I can just feel completely fine. Are you with me? Anybody, you know what I'm talking about, right? We do that, don't we? But other people do it to us. And sometimes we have very weak will. We have convictions, but we don't live by them. We live by desire instead of conviction. And here's the thing, church, as long as you look like Jesus, you're a reminder to the world that they serve the wrong king. Are you with me? As long as you serve Jesus, you're a reminder to the world that they serve the wrong king. And it's an uncomfortable reminder. You ever have a reminder around you that you just don't want? What do we try to do? We try to ignore it. Husbands, let's be honest, okay? Today's our wife's day. Like, there's a honey-do list that you have been ignoring for a long time, isn't there? And every time she comes your direction and she's asking you to do the thing, to paint the wall, whatever, put the bench, whatever, the place, the thing, you do everything you can to avoid that conversation. Because it's a reminder that there's work to be done. It's a reminder that you're going to have to get uncomfortable. And what we do, church, is we tend to surround ourselves with people who give us permission instead of people who give us correction. Are you with me? We're all looking for, where's my crew at? Where's my entourage? Where are my peoples? Where are my family? And ultimately, we are attracted to and we desire to be around people that will agree with the things that we want to do. And we tend to surround ourselves with voices that will confirm our desires. Are you with me? And what's interesting is it goes against the grain for us as individuals, as people, as humans, to surround ourselves with people that will correct us. We don't like it. We want to be free to choose our own kings. And we don't take kindly to somebody telling us that the king that we want to serve is not the king that God created us to serve. And so we try to change the channel. We try to turn down the volume. We press the mute button. And we do this until we find a voice that resonates with our desires. What we want to do is we want to take the path of least resistance. But I think we all know deep down, truly know this, that any true man or woman of God is going to encourage you, challenge you, push you, motivate you, inspire you, rebuke you, direct you. Not to take the path of least resistance, but to take the path that brings the most glory to God. Are you with me, church? Any true man or woman of God, when they speak to you, they're going to motivate you towards the things that God has called you to live for. They're not going to sound like the crowd. In fact, one of the ways that you can truly know whether or not it's a man or woman of God is their perspective unique? Are they saying things that the crowd is not? Does their words line up with what the Bible says, and does everybody tell you you're crazy? Are you with me, church? A true man or woman of God is going to say the things that sting initially but build you up eventually. They're going to say the things that do not tickle your ears, but they motivate your spirit. They're going to look at you and say, no, you are better than that. You were made for more than this. Don't settle for him. Don't sell your innocence. Don't auction off your integrity. You are set apart. That's why you can't go there. You are chosen. That's why you can't be this. You are purposed. You are called. You are destined. You are adopted by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You don't have the name you used to have. The old things have gone away. You're new now. This is not what new looks like. This is what old looks like. And I'm calling you out of that because I know who you are. You weren't created to serve that king. That king will fail you. That king will leave you. That king will abandon you. And I know you want to look like everybody else, but honey, everyone else is miserable and headed to an eternity without God. And I want better for you than that. I want better for you than that. But we get like stubborn kids, don't we? You're trying to ruin my life. You murderer of love. You're trying to take my joy. No, I'm not. I'm trying to preserve it. I'm trying to help you. I don't have ill will towards you. I don't get anything out of this. We carry on in 1 Samuel chapter 8, going down to verse 7. It says, God answered Samuel, go ahead and do what they're asking. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me as their king. From the day I brought them out of Egypt until this very day, they've been behaving like this, leaving me for other gods, and now they're doing it to you. See, a lot of times in church, a lot of times in relationships with people, when we watch them choose the wrong king, sometimes we mistakenly assume that it's about us, that we failed, that we did something wrong. Any parents in here and you're beating yourself up over where your kid's at right now? I mean, sometimes we do fail, right? I mean, a lot of times we do, but a lot of times people are just choosing their king. We all have to make that decision. We all have to make that choice. We all have to come to a place as mature individuals where we say, I'm going to follow God or I'm not. And church, I've been around for a while and I've seen a lot of church splits. I've seen churches fractured over stupid things. I've seen a lot of divorce. I've seen a lot of marriages come to an end because one or both of them was wrapped up in themselves. I've seen people choose new kings and reject God. And the interesting thing is that everybody feels like their story or their situation is unique or exceptional. Everybody feels like their story is unique or exceptional. I've had people say, well, you don't know what I've been through. That's why. You don't know how I've been hurt in the past. That's why. I've had people come to me. I've had people come to me, look me in the eye and say, I don't need to go to church to serve God. I'm going to prove to you that I can serve God completely on my own. That I can think of, I've had 3 people look me in the eye and say those exact same words, and all 3 of them are not serving God today. And we feel like our situation is different or exceptional, but if we're being honest, we all behave like this, don't we? And we aren't rejecting men or churches. we're rejecting the king. We're rejecting the king. And I think the difficult thing about being a man or a woman of God is that you have to carry the burden of watching the children of God choose visible kings because they lack the faith to follow the invisible king. And that's really what separates the spiritual boys from the men. That's the difference between Samuel and the people, whether we run to man or to God. It's whether we run to man or to God. You know what's so interesting about Samuel? I mean, for those of us that have gone through maybe Sunday school as a child, or maybe we just read the Bible like we should, we know the story of Samuel. And when Samuel first heard from God, he was a small boy. He was just a child, and he was living in the temple. He was living with the priest, a man named Eli, and he was laying in bed one night, and he heard a voice calling out, Samuel, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel runs to the priest, and the priest says, I didn't call you, go back to bed. And they repeat this process several times. And finally, the story ends with God calling Samuel, and Samuel saying, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. See, I think the difference between Samuel and the Israelites is that the Israelites weren't listening. Are you with me? The Israelites didn't want God to speak. They weren't paying attention. They didn't want to hear what he had to say. But Samuel was different in the sense that he ran to God and said, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. And you know what's interesting about Samuel is he gets 2 books in the Bible, and he's not even really the focal point of those books. If you read Samuel, there are other central characters in that story. We learn about God, we learn about Saul, we learn about David, and Samuel really is, for the most part, really a secondary character in his own books. And I believe that's because he understood that he wasn't the hero of his story, God was. That he was just a servant of the king. That when he ran to God, he didn't say, God, you have a king in the making here. God, I'm ready to go and be what I need. God, call people to me and I will lead them. He ran and said, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. You are the king in this scenario, and I am your servant. You're my king. I choose you. I'm not choosing Eli. I'm not choosing what my mother has for me. I'm not choosing what society speaks over me. I'm not choosing what my friends are doing. God, I acknowledge that you are king. Speak, for I'm listening. And you want to know what will set you apart from the crowd is whether or not you run to man or God. Whether or not when you hear a voice calling your name, you're responding to man or you're responding to God. Does every opportunity, does every situation, does everything that come in front of you, do you pass it through the realm of the physical or do you enter into the realm of the supernatural? Are you listening to me, church? It's whether or not you're choosing God or man. Who are you serving? Who are you serving? Because I believe a lot of us, we're running to the wrong thing saying, Speak, your servant's listening. Are you with me? We're running to the wrong king saying, Speak, your servant is listening. We're running to our ambition saying, Speak, your servant is listening. We're running to our lust saying, Speak, your servant is listening. We're running to our anger, our bitterness saying, Speak, your servant is listening. We're running to our resentment saying, Speak, your servant's listening. We're running to everything but the right thing. We're running to every king but the right king. And I believe that what this world needs is some more Samuels, some more men and women of God, some more pastors, some more fathers, some more mothers who will be crushed over people choosing the wrong thing, who will care enough to be dismayed and do everything they can to lead people back. We're going to wrap up this story in just a moment. So I want you to skip with me to 1 Samuel chapter 12. It's just a few chapters past where we were. And this is Samuel speaking after all of their rejection of God, after they bring in this king named Saul, after all of this, Samuel shows up and he says in 1 Samuel chapter 12, starting at verse 16, he says, pay attention. Watch this wonder that God's going to perform for you now. It's summer, as you well know, and the rainy season is over. Florida, it's the opposite. We're coming into it. It's great. I love it. Not really. He says, but I'm going to pray to God, and he will send thunder and rain as a sign to convince you of the great wrong you have done to God by asking for a king. Samuel prayed to God, and God sent thunder and rain that same day. The people were greatly afraid and in awe of God and of Samuel. I want to encourage the mothers in the room, don't stop praying that God will show up and demonstrate to your child that they're serving the wrong king. Don't stop praying. Don't stop praying for your family member that God will make it rain and they will recognize that they're serving the wrong king. Don't give up just yet. It says in verse 18, Samuel prayed to God, and God sent thunder and rain that same day, and the people were greatly afraid and in awe of God and Samuel. Verse 19 says, then all the people begged Samuel, pray to your God for us. I find it so interesting that before they had a king, it was their God, but after they had a king, it was his God. You notice that little linguistic change? Pray to your God for us. See, we have a king now, but your God's mad at us, and we're too busy serving our king. So, see, that's what happens when you get the wrong king. You don't need God anymore. It says, pray to your God for us, your servants. Pray that we won't die. On top of all of our sins, we've piled on one more, asking for a king. Samuel said to them, listen to this. This is the heart of a pastor. This is the heart of a mother. This is the heart of a father. He says, don't be fearful. It's true that you have done something very wrong. All the same, don't turn your back on God. He's telling them the truth. You've sinned. You've made a mistake. But then he's encouraging them. He's not condemning them. Listen to me, parents. Sometimes we make a mistake in that we care so deeply for our kids that when they make a mistake themselves, we begin to condemn them instead of speaking life back into them. We make them feel like a failure instead of making them feel like there is still hope. Samuel doesn't do that. Samuel says, don't be fearful. It's true, you've done something wrong. All the same, don't turn your back on God. Worship and serve him, heart and soul. Don't chase after ghost gods. There's nothing to them. They can't help you. They're nothing but ghosts. God, simply because of who he is not going to walk off and leave his people. God took delight in making you into his very own. And neither will I walk off and leave you. Listen to me, parents in this room. Listen to me, mothers. Listen to me. Don't walk off and leave just yet. Listen to me, woman of God. Don't walk off and leave. Don't walk off and leave. There's somebody that is dependent on you. There's somebody that needs you praying for them. There's somebody that needs you encouraging them. There's somebody that needs you pointing them to the right king. Don't walk off and leave them. Samuel said that would be a sin against God. I'm staying right here at my post, praying for you and teaching you the good and right way to live. I'm staying at my post. Do you hear me, parents? I'm staying at my post. I'm staying at my post. I can't make those decisions for you, but I'm going to stay at my post and I'm going to pray for you. And I'm not giving up on you. And I'm not going to quit. And I'm not going to just let the wrong king walk off with the spoils that are you and your soul. Are you with me? I'm not going to let the wrong king walk off and win this battle. I'm staying at my post and I'm going to fight on my knees for as long as I have to. And I'm going to keep on being that example to you. And I'm going to keep on loving you. And I'm going to keep on giving you grace. And I'm going to keep on pointing the way. And I'm going to keep on showing you what it looks like to serve a true king. He says, but I beg of you, fear God and worship him honestly and heartily. You've seen how greatly he has worked among you. Be warned, If you live badly, both you and your king will be thrown out. I just love Samuel's heart so much because in spite of the rejection of God by the people, Samuel never gave up on them. He never stopped praying for them. He never stopped teaching them. He never left his post. That's the heart of a pastor. Are you with me? That's the heart of a mother, isn't it? And this world needs more of that. It needs more of that. More people that will stand in the gap, that won't give up, that won't quit. And I want to encourage you to be that person in somebody's life. Be a Samuel to somebody. But for everybody else, I want to encourage you to plant yourself under a man of God. To plant yourself under a woman of God. I want to encourage you to seek out somebody, if you don't have them already, who is bold enough to call out your false gods and your earthly kings. Someone who will challenge you, someone whose heart breaks for you. Plant yourself under them and listen to their counsel. They're not trying to rob your joy. They're not trying to ruin your life. They're not trying. All that they want is that you serve the right king. Find that person in your life. And I want to speak for just a moment because I believe that for some of you, you have that person in your life, and just like the Israelites, you haven't received the direction that they've been trying to give you. You've been chasing after the wrong kings, and you know that they haven't left their post, and they've been faithful. And I believe that somewhere out there, there's a mother right now whose heart is broken because you have been choosing the wrong kings. And I want to encourage somebody in this room this morning to go to her, to go to him, to go to them, and make it right. Tell them I've sinned. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I realize now that you've always had my best interest in heart. Please forgive me for doubting that. Please forgive me for the times that I've crushed you. But ultimately, church, find the prophet that God has placed in your path to point you to the king. Find the prophet that God has placed in your path to point you to the king. God speaks to us in many ways. God speaks to us through his word. God speaks to us through prayer. God speaks to us directly. But I also believe that God speaks to us through prophets. And the crazy thing about prophets is that prophets are never accepted in their own homes. They're never accepted in their own towns. The Bible tells us that. And for many of us, we've been shutting out the voice of the prophet that's trying to point us to the king. Just learn to listen. I'd like everybody in this room, if you can, to close your eyes with me this morning.